Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Vobes show. It's very nice to be here on another exciting day. It's wet where I am sitting. Yes, I'm afraid it's soaking wet. But that's only because I couldn't get to the loo in time. No, it's raining outside, ladies and gentlemen, and it's a Monday. The two things are not connected. It is the 16th of December 2019. It's 8 o'clock here in the UK. British meantime, not summertime, nearly said summertime. There's no way that it is summer. It's dark outside at 8 o'clock. It would be light if it was summer. Anyway, welcome and all. Lovely to see you all here. We've got a full house by the looks of things. We've got Linda Kane out there, the lovely Julia. Hello, lovely Julia. Victoria. Hello, Vicky. We have Marriott Genealogy. Hello to you. We have D for Bricks, Peter May. Go Richard, the best YouTube channel out there. Thank you very much. Very kind of you. Jonathan Beluzic. Hello, Jonathan. Tim Williams is out there. Francisco is also out there ringing his bell. Robert Croser, Fiona Cooper. Saw Dean Cooper earlier, who said he's in bed and not feeling very well, which is a bit of a shame. So there we go. Hopefully you can hear me and see me. Nature's Beauty. Hello, Richard. Hello, Nature's Beauty. Lovely to see you. We're going to do something slightly different today. I'm going to do a semi-serious. You know, I do. This channel is, for those that have come here for the very first time, I should just point out this channel is not like the Bald Explorer in as much as it is a little bit anarchic. It's a bit sillier. I let my hair down, as you can see, long golden locks of it. But it's all about participation. It's all about you. It's all about you talking to me and me trying to read what's going on. Bear in mind, there is a 40-second delay. So I don't always get to see all the comments and I don't always get to read them all out, although I do try my best. As such as Francesco Bellringer is just telling me that it's very... well, clearly nothing to you. No, wait a minute. He said it was wet and windy just a second ago. The timeline, the chat box moves up, and I try to read it. So that's good. Laura Riddle is there. Hello, Laura. Nice to see you. Very smart jacket. Thank you very much. I do try to make a bit of an effort. It's more the fact that it's cold in this particular room than out. I did fire up the SE, and do you know what? I nearly set my camera up and filmed like a minute of the SE with all the lovely flames, and I thought I nearly played it in and thought that would be quite fun just to warm everybody up. But tonight I got to warm you up with my personality, so that's the best I can offer you. D for Bricks is out there. He says you ain't got any hair. Don't know what you're talking about there. Hair. Yes, no, I haven't got any hair. I've let it all down. It's all run around. It's disappeared. I don't know where it's gone. So that's it. Bonjour to Joe Merchant. Bonjour to you. That's very nice. Francisco says, I give up. My internet is impossible. The show hasn't even started for me. I may join you later. I'm so sorry about that. We can see your typing. That doesn't help you if you can't hear me. But there we are. That's it. Anyway, it's a Monday evening. As I say, I want to do something slightly different. I want to start at a bit of a debate about things because I'm genuinely trying to work something through in my mind. If you've seen The Bald Explorer recently, you will know that I went to my childhood hometown of Horsham, and in my hometown, Horsham, at the back of where I used to live was this wonderful farmland. And if you watch the show, I happened to walk around the... There's my phone pinging away to me. I happened to walk around the farmland, which has been built on since the 1980s. And it's rather frightening to see one's childhood ripped away and built on with new houses, particularly with this sort of theme park quality to them, implying that there was once an industrial area with a mill and a tannery and a maltings, which actually this was farmland for generations and generations and had never been any different. And so that was a bit of a heart shocker. And I did a follow-up video on the Bald Explorer discussing more about that sort of thing and reading out some of the comments that people were making, which was very interesting. And I've been thinking about this. Has been an interesting thing to think about. Let me just go and see who else we've got there. Nigel Sadler says hello. Linda Kane says, anyone got any ice for her rhubarb gin? No, got plenty of water, by the way. Kim Murden says, found you at last. Hello, Kim. Lovely to see you. That Kim, by the way, is the lady who we went to see, the lovely Julia and I, who's a herbalist. So do welcome her. Richard Suggett is there. Hello to you. Mark, Donny McLeod, good evening. And Ice for the Rhubarb. Linda Kane says, Robert Croser, the best podcasts are the ranty ones, of course. And Joe Merchant says, Linda, could you post some? Oh, could you post some what? The ice. Yes. So anyway, so going back to this thing that I'm trying to work through, and part of me is this change in the landscape. Now, most people were pretty much agreeing with me that I thought this new build situation and the land grab and all that was particularly a bad thing. Some people disagreed, and I'm always interested in why people see things different. It's nice that people see things the same as me. Of course it is. It's lovely. We can all get round and we can all put the world to rights. But it's actually quite interesting to hear those comments from people who have a completely different perspective, which is why, actually, with the recent election, and let's not go down there very far, but it's interesting hearing and seeing how people react to those that didn't go for Mr. Johnson in the election, seeing how they reacted because they think differently to those that did vote for it. And it's just interesting, isn't it? It's interesting to see somebody else's point of view. And it's interesting that you can see somebody else's point of view and still actually be friends and just agree to disagree if you cannot find something that you can agree on. So I've been thinking about this business about the building on land and all of this. And actually, somebody pointed me out to an interesting book, which I have been reading all afternoon. I haven't finished it, unfortunately. And this is a book called Real England. I think this was published in about 2009, 2010 by a chap called Paul Kingsnorth. Never heard of him before, never heard about this book, but a YouTuber had, or somebody on my YouTube comments had suggested, read this, Real England. And, excuse me. The interesting thing about this particular book, if you've read it, I'd love to hear from you. And if you've got an opinion on all of this, I'd love to hear from you, because this is a comments reaction show. From what I have read and what it says on the blurb of the back, there is a change going on in society. There is a change. And although we cannot keep the world in aspic, and nobody really wants to keep the world in aspic, we do need new things coming in. But there's a change which is perhaps a little bit more sinister, or it's happening without us giving permission, if you like. And it does. And he cites things like pubs. The old-fashioned pub that you used to have, where you could go in, put yourself up beside the fire and have a genuine pint of local real ale. But you can't do that now, because these pubs are all run by pub cos, I think he was calling them. Now, this book is 10 years out of date, so some of these facts and figures may be completely wrong. Linda Kane says, I've got a copy of it. I hadn't started it. You must start reading it. It's fascinating. It's fascinating insight. So, yeah, he's saying that, you know, that the pubs, for example, they've all changed. His main beef, really, from what I can see, is, as it says on here, the battle against the bland. Everything is turning up the same. Wherever you go in the countryside, it now could almost be the same. He cites... who does he cite? J.R. Priestley, he cites, driving into Southampton. And he says, Robert Croser would be interested in this. He cites, as he drives into, in the 20s or something, he drives into Southampton. He says, all these red brick houses and these shop fronts and these bits and pieces that you see driving in, I could be driving in Carlisle, there's no difference. And I think that was the interesting thing. If you look, and I've often said this and thought this and made this in my videos, that you go to the Cotswolds. There's something about the Cotswold, isn't there? The stone, the oolithic limestone in the Cotswolds. You go around Sussex and you see the flint in the houses. And you go up to Cumbria, as I have earlier this year, twice this year. Fantastic. You see these wonderful... is it granite up where you are, Robert? These wonderful, small, but very, very stylish, very distinct houses and the styles. And wherever you go, in the old days, you know, pre I suppose, Victorian England, pre-then, you would see that the local stone, the local building materials being used in the environment that it was being utilised. So timber frames where there was trees, local stone where it was local stone, sandstone, limestone, whatever it was, granite or whatever. You go, yeah, thanks, it's granite. There we are, Carlisle, yes, red brick terraces. But now it's not that, is it? We can transport these new building materials anywhere and everywhere, and now you see glass and steel and the same theme park designs are coming in. I live in Worthing in West Sussex, down on the seafront, which traditionally was, I suppose, an Edwardian Victorian seaside town. There's a little bit of Art Deco here, but not much. But I would say strictly sort of Edwardian is really how it is. But although that's not what the council want anymore, because we're knocking all that down. No, it's not good enough to have that sort of image. We've got to have all these buildings that could be anywhere. Not only could they be anywhere in England, but they could be anywhere in the world. Some of them, you look at them and you think, well, that's just a scaled down version of what you might see in a city in any other part of the world. And it's this is the thing that's starting to worry me, and I'm becoming aware of, because I think this is happening by stealth. I think this blandness that corporations, large corporations, big drinks manufacturers who are putting in, and also coffee supplier, chains of coffee stores that are putting in these shops everywhere. And so that your choice and the diversity, everyone says, oh, diversity is supposed to be a good thing. But actually what we're doing is we're getting rid of diversity. The whole thing about going into one county in a country and sampling a cup of tea or a cup of coffee in a nice, ordinary, small family business are all being wiped out. The shopping centres are all very much looking the same. If you go to Blue Water, suddenly you're in this incredibly micromanaged environment. Blue Water is a great big shopping centre near Thurrock, just near Dartford, I suppose, on the Dartford crossing. And it's very sad because you could be anywhere. You could be in America, Blue Water. It's so bland that the nuances of the country are being steamrolled and flattened. J.B. Priestley, I've mentioned readings of this before, says Mark Donnelly. Mark Donnelly says J.B. even. J.B. J.R. Priestley, I don't know who he was. Francisco says, I'm always Latenigo. I don't know what that means. Anyway, he's back, thank goodness. Kim says that monoculture farming, monoculture towns, monoculture humans. We are forgetful or frightened to display our genuine local cultures. This is so true. With the supermarkets, the same supermarkets marching forward, conquering everywhere. And on the face of it, we think, the convenience is really useful, isn't it? And we can buy the same wine or the same beer or the same tomatoes across the country, and there is no regional difference. Nigel Sadler says the Worthing builders stole the sand off the beach to build Worthing in the 1800s. That's why there's hardly any sand left. But at least, I suppose you could argue, at least it was local sand. At the very least, you could say that. David Keel says the problem is too many people in the world causing the erosion of our land, or greedy developers given free rein to build. Free rein to build without sensitivity to the environment and sensitivity in terms of the history and the geology. It just seems that we are blindly letting this happen. Robert Croser says, one of my favourite market towns, Kirby Stephen, now has a Costa coffee. Exactly. Does it need a Costa coffee? Can there not be a small business that can make coffee and make it unique? Instead of it the same as everywhere else, like the famous chain of hamburgers or beef burgers, whatever they are, that seems to be everywhere, or the same brand of pizza that seems to be everywhere. Vicky Allen says, everywhere you go, it's just Costa coffee shops. Exactly, Costa or the American equivalent. Linda Kane says, too many people all wanting and needing stuff is to blame. I put the to blame in there, and it's true. But I also think while we are overpopulated and people are working in a way that they need stuff quickly, loads of it, and no sense of wanting something that is unique, different, special, that sets you apart and shows off something from your region or supports local people. Joe, Veg Grower podcast says, as you may know, I grew up in Pulborough, and that village has doubled its size in my lifetime, with many of the houses being squeezed into spaces that was available, and it's still going on. And we've seen the heresy of these buildings that go up, and instead of having 8 apartments in that they might have done before, they've got 16, so that you need furniture that is specially made smaller than normal furniture in order to put it in. And by the time you've got the bed in it, there is no room in your bedroom for anything else. I mean, it's still a bedroom because you can just about fit a bed in it. Joe Merchant says, our planet is getting too busy with humans just doing what they want. Judy says, I agree. High streets and shopping centres are all the same. You could be anywhere. And they talk about the charity shops opening up in the place of, when there was all these shops closing. They're all the same charity shops. It's the same names, isn't it? It's the same British Heart Foundation, Sue Ryder, and, all of the scope. They've become chains of the charity shops that are up and down the countryside. Do you think housing development called Poundry in Dorset is a good idea? I don't know that one at all, actually. Mark Donnelly says, damned if you do and damned if you don't. People want houses and other houses are left to crumble and people complain. Why can't they build houses that fit in and not a cardboard box? And this is one of the problems when you see these housing developments is they spring up, instead of like a town evolves over, say, 80, 100 years of development, small developments, building up that 600 houses within the space of 6 months. It's very difficult. Joe Merchant says, Kirby Stephen, lovely place. Robert Croser says there's plenty of small cafes. Bill Bryson loves the place. Well, that's great. Well, fortunately, I think the further north you go, the less you are affected. Andy Dalglish says that many housing estates being built on the floodplain, so rivers here in East Sussex. Yes, it's a recipe for disaster. It's only waiting to happen, is it not? And we've seen it in other places. In Tonbridge, or Tunbridge, I don't know now how the official way of pronouncing that is, because you're damned if you do and damned if you do if you get it wrong. The only independent shops are the nail bars and the e-cigarette shops. And isn't that a tragedy? Isn't that not a tragedy? The Weald of Kent must have entrepreneurs and people who can do more things and sell all sorts of different things. Where are the bakers, the butchers, the candlestick? We don't need candles these days, but you know what I mean. Where are they? No, we don't need them anymore because we have supermarkets. And we allowed this to happen, not realising what it was doing to the diversity of this island. Vicky says, I was thinking of moving to Pulborough, not so keen now. Well, it doesn't matter where you go, especially in the southeast, you'll just, unless you've got a lot of money, what are you going to do? Where are you going to live? You're going to see the same place. Everywhere is going to be the same corporate logos glowing everywhere. Linda Kane says, my village is now the largest in this constituency. Apparently, people still want to move here as it's a lovely rural village. I don't think so. And of course, this is the problem, that people can't afford to move into the rural village. And those that live in the rural village can't afford unless they go in a rabbit hutch. And even then, those rabbit hutches they're building are too expensive. Judith says, we have a Costa and a Starbucks, but so many independent coffee shops. I never go into Costa and Starbucks on principle. Exactly, because they've all got this mandate they have to follow, this very same process. My son Billy worked at Starbucks, and so the approach is as identical. Why would you want to go from one town to another town and have something that is identical? Where's your sense of adventure? Where's your sense of finding out something about it? Surely the whole point, you go to Devon to go and have a cream tea. And all the other luscious things. You don't go to Devon and go, oh, well, we'll just go in there. But I think we're being brainwashed. There's no big mind doing this, I don't suppose, but I think we are being brainwashed to accept this second best, this bland. The Veg Grower podcast, 4 of the pubs that was in Pulborough have been knocked down and turned into housing estates. That's right. This is what's also happening to the places. It's become too expensive to buy beer, and the community centres where arguments and debates were always traditionally done and people got to know each other, the churches and the pubs are going. Robert says the lanes in Carlisle has a bit of different character in the shopping centre, but, that's like one or two lanes, presumably. Linda Kane says charity shops, at least it means there aren't loads of mouldering empty shops. That's true. I'm not arguing. I mean, I buy a lot of my clothes from charity shops because at least they are unique clothes that may have been previously owned, but because they came from different periods of time, they're not. It's like walking down the street and seeing the same person in the same jumper. Vicky says Poundbury is a Dorset town owned by the Duchy of Cornwall. Oh, right. And built in line with Charles's vision of sustainable and architecturally pleasing community. Is that the one near Dorchester? I haven't been there, but I've heard that it's a bit of a higgledy-piggledy, but also because it's all manufactured at the same time, it doesn't quite work. Gotta love a charity shop, says Joe Merchant. Nail bars, Linda Kane says, don't get her started. Julia says, all I say is IKEA. And exactly, everyone's buying their furniture, so we all have the same design furniture by a small limited number of people. And isn't that a bit strange? Back in the day when you could buy a chair that was lovingly made by a local craftsman who enjoyed his work and put together, a piece of furniture that would last forever and was incredibly well made and be passed down from family to family. Now, you buy a sofa and you pay now, you buy now, you pay later, and by the time you've finished even started paying for it, it's come to the end of its life. Where I live in Staines, they have plans to build on all the green spaces, the shops having flats built on. I mean, this is, this is our world. Nobody's really voted for this. Nobody's asked for this, yet they are doing it. Joe Merchant says that I have to say Southwick is a nice town. It has the square is great, butcher in the greengrocer, and it's a shame that we can say, oh, here this place has got something. Instead of that being a ubiquitous statement, it's like, oh, this place over here, this unique place, this place in so and so is interesting. Graham says, I have to say that my hometown of Petworth seems to retain its local trades and has not massively house building, so lucky. Lived here all my life. It's a wonderful town. And I suppose that might be down to the Leconfield estate, making sure that all these new builds are out of it. And so that's where kind of, a lord of the manor has actually prevented, because presumably he's getting enough money coming in from rents and whatever farmland that he has. Mark Donny McLeod says, I'm on it. If the plan is accepted by others, I shall be making a period-style business of baking baked goods, trying to see if I can get it into look period to circa 1900 work. Not quite sure about that, what you're saying. Nigel Sadler says Sevenoaks and parts of Tunbridge have reasonable selection of independents. Again, some of these places are just noted because they are exceptions. Linda Kane says it was a rural village back in the last 20 years. Its population has increased to 10,000 plus. And again, it's look at the cars on the driveways of these rural villages and the people who are coming in and what will happen to that. The diversity of the population is suddenly that it is just one class of people who are now living in these rural villages, and the labourer is no longer rubbing shoulders with the lord of the manor. Vicky says, I know more houses have to be built, but doctors, dentists and schools need more too. Yeah, and we're not building enough of the infrastructure that supports this. These housing estates do not have a pub. They don't have village shops. They don't even have buildings that could be rented as shops by entrepreneurs who want to set up a little hairdressing salon or a funeral business. You know, the two principal things that you would think. People always need a haircut and they're always going to need to be buried by somebody, but they don't even bother to build that. And a corner shop for food. It's dreadful. Kim says there is a question, though, that charity shops don't pull full... Oh, hang on, it's gone. Full rated. So genuine small businesses find it hard to establish themselves. In Lewis, the ones that survive own the building. Yeah, so, you know, the rents and the business rates sort of seem to prevent people from even giving it a go. I've seen near me a number of these little shops that people start up a business and within 6 months they've just gone bankrupt because I guess the business plan didn't work out. They didn't have enough time to make the businesses work. So it's terrible. Julia says, okay, I should have said more. IKEA and 600 plus houses on the floodplain in her hometown. And I know, having been to Julia's house umpteen times, especially when it rains or a few days after it rains, as the water has nowhere else to go now, it goes onto her estate. And when IKEA is in there, it's going to be bedlam. And the people who are making these decisions don't live in these areas. They're nicely tucked away, thank you very much, in these ghettoed villages, which is a shame. Nigel says Tunbridge does have an independent butcher, fishmonger and baker in the high street, but only one of each, so that you have no choice. There are others, 3 chemists, and only one which is a chain. This is the thing. Our choice is being eroded. I went to the supermarket today. Now, I've got a choice of different supermarkets if I want to go to a supermarket. But if I want to go to a greengrocer, I don't have any choice. I can't go. And the thing about going to my local supermarket, because it's nearer, is that I can't buy loose vegetables anymore. I can buy onions loose, but I can't buy potatoes loose. I can buy carrots loose. You know, the old days you used to be able to weigh things and put them in a bag. This sort of choice it's being eroded slowly. But the thing is, half the time you don't know it's being eroded, and we're sort of being shoehorned into thinking we've got this massive choice because you walk down the aisles and there's so much choice. But actually, you know, you want to buy 1 or 2 nails. You can't. You have to buy a packet of 10, and you only want the one. The old ironmongers have vanished, you know, and so you end up buying this stuff that you don't need. You can go online and buy stuff, but you're paying for the postage, and you're still buying in packages, which is easier for those companies to provide for you, which is a shame. Vicky Allen says that this is giving me an idea of videos of the old-fashioned towns still around. Watch this space. Good for you, Vicky. A lot of people putting messages and then having them retracted. Do you retract them yourselves, or is that some nefarious? Is that Google doing it? Linda says all the time is left to the developers to include the infrastructure on the developments. It will never happen. No, of course it won't. You know, they're flogging the houses incredibly fast. Before they're even built half the time. A baker's shop selling diverse baked foods in a period-style shop, Richard. If you get screwed by the council, that's what shuts businesses down. Greedy councils. Yeah, I guess there's greedy councils. There's, you know, the whole. Everything has to be a profit, and the profit has to be a big profit. Nobody sort of cares about what it's actually doing to people themselves and the mental health of people. These old places that are moving. I mean, I get distraught when I see the landscape being gobbled up. Now, why should that matter? Why should it matter that just, you know, people, and I know there are plenty of people on the Bold Explorer group who will argue the other side of the thing and say, but Richard, you know, you can't stop progress. What are you doing? You can't put us into a time capsule that we've got to stand still, where people need homes, you know, the same old argument. And people don't want the old-fashioned ways. They want the new ways. Why is it? And yet, there, you know, here you can see people are upset by this. They don't like the rate of change, the pace of change, the change that is being made by fewer people who live far away and not part of the community making those decisions. And look at the pub scenario where all these old pubs are closing. You go into a pub now, your choice of beer, if you drink beer, is very limited to the commercial brands because that's what you're being pushed at. And the pubs that are surviving are the ones which are these, what do they call them? These vertical drinking environments. They get rid of the chairs so you can't sit down, because if you can sit down you might take time over your drink. They don't give you tables, because if you have a table to put your glass down, it might take longer for you to drink it. You're going to drink quicker. If you're standing up, you've got nowhere to sit down, and all you can do is drink, and they make a much better profit on it. The place where you could go and and they play loud music, of course, so you can't hear each other speak, so you'll just keep drinking, because if you talk to one another, obviously you're going to take longer time to drink your drink. And it's not an ideal environment. Those pubs that you could sit and have a conversation, be part of the community, get to know one another, and that sort of thing, and where you would meet new people, seems to be disappearing because they can't survive. Joe says, Fox's greengrocers in Southwick Square, you can buy loose fruits there. It's a long way. It's a long way for me to go to get my loose, it's going to cost a fortune in the car if every time I want to go and get a couple of carrots. Vicky says, my hometown has at least 4 markets, market 4 times a week where there's lots of fruit and veg. Well, that's fantastic. Linda Kane says, she's talking to Mark, Vicky says the pubs are becoming bistro pubs. Everything's upmarket, isn't it? Everything is now aimed at a certain class where your disposable income has to be pretty high in order to buy into this somewhat sterile environment, with the bought-in this and the decor that is all very designed by somebody far away who doesn't live in that community. And the same style of that pub is repeated all around the countryside, which brings me back to that whole point about the country, is that we have come from people who didn't move around very much, and they created something unique, an environment that then when you do travel about, it's interesting. You go somewhere and you go, that's the whole point of travel. But actually, we're sort of saying that nobody needs to travel anymore. You don't need to go anywhere because everywhere is the same as your hometown. Vicky says the pub food has gone upmarket and expensive. Or, if it's cheap, it's ping food. It's microwave. Nobody cooks homemade stuff. The menus don't change significant. They're all pretty much the same. It's homogenized. Very, very bland, very the same. Very few places that are very different. Which is why if you go to places like down in Cornwall, Mousehole, that I made a video about with the lovely Mark Selwood, people go to these places which are unique and attractive. The old Elizabethan timber frame buildings that they had, people go there to look at them. They're not going to go to a bland new town with horrible brick buildings, glass and metals and, brushed aluminium, sliding doors and, large things, because everywhere looks like that. Why would you go there? And neon lights and all of this, it all looks the same. Why would you go there? You're not going to be drawn to that. You're drawn to charm. And yet the architects and the people who commission the architects are not suggesting that they put charm and the community into that situation. I don't understand it. Find it hard to comprehend, because it's such short thinking at the moment. Patrick Rose says, look at the at Piers Corbyn interview on climate change. The objective is to force people into the cities where there is greater control over the population. Well, climate change. Let's talk about that briefly for the moment. Climate change is something we're told is now a thing, okay? Which is fine. It may be a thing. The climate changes, we know that, but we're told it's man-made. It's all our fault. We're all going to die in 12 years' time. Now, if you want to challenge that or talk about it or have a different opinion, the same principle is coming in. No, you're not allowed to talk about it. You're not allowed to have a different opinion because you are a denier, my friend. You are a denier. Now, it may be that it is happening, but there may be people who are just yet not convinced. I am not convinced by it. I think the carbon in the atmosphere is actually very good for the plant life. It's good for the trees. They need it to grow. I remember listening to David Bellamy, who has since died, when climate change was first announced, he said, what an absolute load of rubbish. And he was purporting that there were more plants thanks to the greenhouse, to the CO2 gases, which is what we need to grow for an ever-increasing population. And if we're actually trying to reduce them, we are going to starve ourselves because there won't be enough CO2 in the atmosphere. And that was David Bellamy, a very respected botanist. Linda Kane says the Wednesday market, Richard. Okay. Rob King says, doesn't Julia have an allotment? I'm sure that she'll give you some veg if you do a bit of digging. I did do a bit of digging, actually. Linda says, it seems to be the only large places opening in Worthing are places just selling desserts. Oh, desserts. Yes, there's a new dessert shop full of sugar and full of sweet things. I mean, and that's that, talk about sugar and sweet things. And salt and sugar are being shoved into our food. It's only recently now we're sort of, enough people have complained about it. They're bringing them back because they've had to make these instant foods palatable so that people will eat it. People don't cook anymore. People, on the whole, people are being worked to the bone. I mentioned this to Julia today, and she said, well, people are working long hours. I said, well, wait a minute. Haven't we got every conceivable labour-saving device there is? Aren't we supposed to be having much more labour-free time, leisure time now? Aren't we? Aren't we supposed to be not working quite as much because we've got all these robot things that are doing it? We've got all these special gadgets and gizmos which make life so much easier, and yet still people are working all hours that God sends and haven't got time to go into the kitchen and actually cook something. Or maybe they haven't got enough time because they're too busy on social media or watching YouTube channels live and typing into them. Vicky says, anyone know what the lovely old pub is called on the beach at St Ives in Cornwall? That's a good question. No idea. Robert Croser says, Julia has raised beds, which is nice. Mark Donis says, Patrick Rose, I read UN Agenda 2030 and I was told I was unstable. That was their plan. If the climate change didn't change the planet, would be dead, as so would we. Oh, I saw a thing about Greta Thunberg, who said everybody's trying to shut her up. She said at this climate change thing in Spain, she said everyone's trying to silence her. Well, I can't see that, seeing as that she's on every media going and she's been invited to speak at the thing. Nobody's trying to silence her. Time magazine made her person of the year. How can she possibly turn round and say that people are trying to silence her? And the message, she has made that message louder and clearer than anybody else. Even the runner-up of the whatever his name was of the presidency, who started a lot of this false nonsense. Whose name Al Gore. I mean, nobody's trying to silence her. I wish that she would be silenced. I mean, she's a 16-year-old girl that we're all suddenly having to bow down and think, well, wait a minute, there are other people who have qualifications who disagree that are not allowed to talk, but a 16-year-old girl is suddenly allowed to make her case. And we're not allowed to criticise her, of course. Kim says, congratulations. Indeed, 3,000 is a major achievement. I must have missed that. Nikki Jess says hello. Hello, Nikki. Patrick says climate change is a shame. The carbon is in the sea greater than in the air by 50 times. If you remove it from the air, the sea replaces it. We need CO2 to survive. Yes, you see, the counter-arguments are all being shuffled under the table. You're not allowed to debate them. And I think it's just, we should be able to talk about these things, but we're not, because, again, we're being shoehorned into how we live our lives under the big banner of corporations who make all the decisions and tell us that we need to live in these little boxes, that we need to eat this special kind of food that's being produced in supermarkets, that we no longer become unique and actually think for ourselves, because social media and the media and adverts and Instagram and all these things are telling us how we now think. So we don't even have to think anymore for ourselves. And theories that might go against things are being shut down. And the big corporations who give us these platforms to do free speech, it's only free speech as long as the speech is actually, what we want you to talk about. Veg Grower Podcast says, I would love to have more time and less work. Well, you can have. I mean, the choice is yours. You can. This is the thing I don't quite understand. People don't have to work all hours that God sends. They do have a choice. They don't have to do those jobs that they are doing. They can decide, I want less things in my life. I can. We don't have to have 2 cars, for example, or we don't have to have Sky Sports, or we don't have to have all these things. We don't have to have mobile phones in our lives. We can actually have a lot less things. Just buy a few second-hand books, you'll be all right. Andrew Norris has said something, but I've just missed it, unfortunately. Kim says, did you hear Brent? No, I didn't hear that one. It's just gone. Nigel Sadler says, Greta is a guest editor of the Today programme over Christmas. I heard that and nearly fell off my bloody seat. This is amazing. A 16-year-old who is a puppet being manipulated by... it's not her. How do you there'll be plenty of 16-year-olds who would like to go, sir, I'd like to do what Greta's doing. No, she has been pushed around and is it's so clearly obvious, but people aren't allowed to think like that. Vicky says, you're down an allotment too much, Mr. Suggett. Linda Kane says, the country and big corporations who use fossil fuels appear to have got their way. The fossil fuels is an interesting one because we would not have all of the amazing things that we have if it wasn't for fossil fuels. I mean, let's face it, plastic is a thing that comes from fossil fuels, and think of all the amount of things you need in a hospital that's made of plastic that you could not use out of any other material. So at the moment, we do need a certain element of fossil fuels for a lot of things. I admit, cars and things, we can clean up the atmosphere, but we're all being pushed very, very quickly into this scenario that we've got to have. We must have these electric cars, and we must have this, and we must have that. 3,000 podcasts, Richard. Who's got 3,000 podcasts? Oh, on The Naked Englishman, you mean? I noticed that, yes, I came up to 3,000 on that. I did about, I think I did that number on the Vobes show, something like that. I've done a load of podcasts, but I was for a while the most prolific podcaster, and I tried to push that as a thing to market myself. Nobody was interested. Podcaster sounds more fun. Podcats, yes, that's true. Andrew Norris, it does. Kim says there are plenty of sensible old women and men who have common sense to offer, but must bow down to the youth. Well, this is the other thing. The youth, of course, who do not have the life experience have been made way. I listen to Radio 4 on BBC Radio quite a lot, and the BBC Radio 4 constantly saying, well, we've got to try and attract more youthful listeners. Why? BBC Radio 4 has always been for those about 45 plus. And it's a nice place. It's a bit biased in its news coverage, but generally it's pretty okay. But why do we have to dumb it down to a youthful audience? Surely there are they could set up something else for those voices. Why have we got to keep opening things up to be inclusive to everybody? It seems mad. What do we got here? Francesca says, I just called an ambulance to recover my internet connection, but they don't think there is enough time. Might have to join back later. Fair enough. In Italy, apparently, you can get an ambulance to fix your internet, which is a strange waste of money, if you ask me. Kim says, my children are very clear she is being used by her parents. My children are very clear she is being used by her parents, yes. You will be hearing from Greta's management. I'm sure, of course, that they're very welcome to get in touch with me. And this is the thing. You speak out of line, boomf, you're out. No debate, no comeback, no nothing, you're out. Vegcur says, I have free motoring. Well, there you are. So what are you complaining about? Vicky says, that's how I now live, thrifty and careful, but I don't mind. Do you know, I think it's so much more rewarding. I'm having to be thrifty because of I'm trying to make a living from YouTube, trying to do these videos and point out various things to various people, and they may disagree with me, and they're most entitled to disagree with me because I don't know nothing half the time. But I don't want the pressure of working for corporations, working for the other person. I enjoy working for real people like yourself, and trying to keep you entertained, trying to do all that. And you set the price. You know, that's the thing. That's what I like about this, is somebody can give me £1 a month if they're interested. Some people don't give me anything, and some people will give me £30 a month. I mean, it's incredible. But the value is then down to you, and I know that I would just work very hard. Not everybody's like that, of course. That's how yes, thrifty. That's it. Robert Crosser says, how is the tachograph working? Elf Wold, apparently 30% of the UK's energy is produced from renewables, which means 70% isn't. And 70% is what's keeping us going and keeping the hospitals open and all the things that we're turning on so many lights and bits and pieces. You know, think of all the people who've got Christmas lights on at the moment. And not that I'm trying to knock Christmas or anything like that. But, you know, if we were really that bothered... but the people who seem to be shouting the most about all of this are the people who are driving the big cars and jetting all over the place. But they're happy to tell everybody else how to live their lives. Patrick Rose says, they make clean coal burning plants now that don't pollute the environment, as in China. So there we go. What's wrong with that? If you can carbon capture and you can make it so it's not poisonous, then surely we can carry on doing that. That seems a sensible way, particularly if we're in a transition between trying to get people onto more electric things. But the electricity's got to be generated somehow. It can't all... But, you know, the electricity that we're told that we must have from renewables, in Worthing we have a whole load of wind farms, or these wind, like an army about to march in, quite sinister looking. I know some people like them, others don't. I don't like them. I never voted for them. I didn't want them on my horizon, but I've got them. I'm lumbered with them. But now they don't work. They've spent all this money on them, and they're just sitting there because the cable broke. And so until it gets fixed, nothing is happening. Joe Merchant says, what about we must fly here and there, too many aircrafts causing pollution? I mean, you know, this is where it gets conflated for me, because I'm against polluting, but I don't believe in that man is doing climate change. I think that's all a big hoax. And it's a big hoax because a lot of people are making a hell of a lot of money out of it. Patrick Rose says, we have 1,000 years of coal left in the country. Yes, there we go. And I mean, it's amazing. We should be using the resources that we've got that benefits mankind, instead of what people... like the rebellion, whatever they call themselves, who are saying, oh, you've got to, you know, carbon neutral it's like they're saying we've got to go back to the Stone Age and not have all these things. Well, people couldn't cope. We could not cope. People do not know how to do that. If you ask them to cut back a little bit, they don't know how to cope. If they take their mobile phone away from them, they can't cope. And then all the interviews that I've ever seen with them, and you say, well, how are you going to do that? And they say, well, it's not for us to say how to do it. We're just saying, you know, you've got to have a massive wartime type thing and stop it. And it's like, well, how are you going to go about it? What are you really saying all of this? Well, we don't know how you'd go about it, but we're just telling you that's what we've got to do. And in the meantime, we'll stick ourselves to buses and hold everybody else up. So I don't agree with their tactics at all. There may be a message in there, but I think they're just alienating people. Kim says, less is more, a motto that works in this house. I think that's absolutely very true. I think you respect things when you don't have so much. If the choice is too big, and look at Christmas, you know, people are just, you go in and everything is so cheap, you can have loads of it, and most of it ends up in landfill. But the people who are doing this are the same people who are saying, oh, climate change, oh, the environment, and yet they're the same people who are doing it. Kim says, not sure that Nigel Sadler, they could just clean them properly for a start. I'm not quite sure what that's about. It amazes me the amount of lights in shops, offices that are full on at night. Exactly, I think that's true. Nigel says glass and ceramics would go a long way, but of course would cost considerably more. And this is what we seem to, everybody wants everything cheap because they want a lot of stuff cheap. And I don't understand this now. I did for a while think that that was a good thing. But actually now I would rather spend more money and have less things. And the things that you buy are very well made by a craftsman, handmade, will last for generations. You could hand down. And if you sell it, it holds its value. That is what I would very much like to see. Hang on a minute. I just seem to have switched a button there by accident on the other screen. Vicky says, and the rebellion people all smoke cigarettes, polluting away the atmosphere. Elfwold, I wouldn't mind so much if these wind farms weren't foreign owned and remotely operated from Germany. Well, there we are, you see. I mean, I think ours is a French operated one. So it's, I absolutely agree. Linda Kane says cheap and plastic. Yeah. Extinction, panic. Oops, sorry. Rebellion, says Kim. Just a lot of anxious death and phobic privileged people. But I do live in Lewis and I see the hypocrisy full on. And it's the bizarre thing is it's all these people who are pretty well off, who can afford to take time off work and go and spend a month complaining about it. The people who actually need to feed their children, they can't afford to go off. They have to get that. Exactly. Extension, says Robert Croser, are all middle class, just saying. It does seem to be the case. And it's not as if they're really being very serious. All these weird dances and these strange dressing up, this apocalyptic message, which is actually scaring children at school, the next generation, who are thinking we're all going to die in 12 years. That guy who sort of co-founded it, who I saw a video of him telling kids that they really had no future, which I think is absolutely dreadful. And nobody's allowed to question it. This is the sad, nobody is allowed to question it. It's one of the subjects that we're not allowed to understand, not allowed to question or have a theory or an opinion against. And this is, same with immigration to the country, same with different cultures in the country. We're not allowed to have, we can't have a different opinion. We can't say, can we just talk about it? Can we have a debate, a sensible, grown-up debate? No, you mustn't have a debate. It's fact. This is the way it is, and this is what you must have. Same with the transgender thing. These minority situations, which we must all know about, whereas we didn't need to know about them a few years ago, and the world got on and everybody was happy. Now suddenly, these are the things. If you get the wrong pronoun with somebody, you've got to learn all this extra stuff. And actually, the chances of bumping into these people and actually having that sort of problem is that it's such a minority thing. It's bizarre. The green industry will make millions for the corporations. Yes, I think that's absolutely right. The corporations are trying to be seen now to be green. They're going out of their way. And who's paying for it all? We are. We're all paying for this. Inadvertently, all the money that the governments hand out and all these deals and everything else, we are paying for it. And we don't have to. This is the strange thing. Vicky says, let's have a heated debate. Yes, if we can all have a heated debate, we don't need to turn the electric on to warm ourselves up. How are we doing on the time? It's 8:54, ladies and gentlemen. Can't believe that we have been waffling on this subject for so long. You obviously don't live in Brighton, Richard. No, I certainly don't live in Brighton. You're quite right. Kim says, and what is bad in my children's school is the teachers are telling the pupils they will just have to sort it. Adults need to just stop this and take responsibility. It is inappropriate. None of this should affect the children. None of this. We should not be telling children that the world is about to end. We should not be telling them that there are more than two genders in this world. You know, when they are old enough to assimilate and have life experience and be able to say, do you know what, actually I do feel that I'm not the gender, that's fine, absolutely fine. But what we're doing is we are influencing these kids to think, this is where I should be, because I mean, look at the peer pressure that children are under to begin with anyway. Even when I was a kid, there was a bit of peer pressure, but nothing like this. I mean, golly, you know, when my kids, the problem was, were you wearing Nike shoes, or did you have an Adidas bag? They were the issues that my kids had to grow up with. Now the issues is, are you really a boy, or are you one of 100 different potential genders, or are you this and that? I mean, it is absurd. It is absurd. And people are going along with this as if this is like so perfectly normal and natural. And yet, yes, it's a minority thing, and a certain number of tiny number of people are concerned about this in reality. But the rest of humanity is having to think about and discuss it and talk about it and make out it is the first problem in the world. And yet it is such a minor problem, really. And you know, there are so many far more impressing things that we are doing. Good evening all, hope you're all well. Little late here, we'll catch up later, says Ed Loud. Won't have a heated debate in Richard's house. No, well, you will if you're by the Essie. Andrew Norris says, watch your pronouns or the police will be with you. Not likely that they don't have more important things to do. I mean, what is the point of the police getting involved with hate speech, for goodness sake? I mean, we knew all this. Sensible people, as Douglas Murray says, we knew all of this. Everyone knew what we were talking about until yesterday. And now suddenly we're not allowed to talk about it. Veg Grower Podcast says, tell children to turn off the TV and computers and walk to school, or if they really want to stop climate change. And that's right, take their mobile phones away from them. But they won't like it. No, they need all that stuff. Don't you know? That's how you stop climate change. Give them more mobile phones and tablets and access to the internet. As the Chinese say, empty vessels make the loudest noise. It's true, absolutely true. So there we go. Robert Baxter says, just tuned in. I hope I haven't missed much of the show. Only all of it. But don't let that worry you. We've got 3 minutes on the clock left. So it's all over to you. I probably said more than I should have done, as ever. Slightly different. We'll have a Wednesday show, which hopefully will be different still. But my point of bringing this up, as I said at the beginning, I've got this book here called Real England, which is just showing us how bland the world is becoming. The diversity is not the diversity you think. The diversity, not so much of different cultures coming from all over the world, but our regional diversity. The diversity of being in an English island and going to Cornwall and seeing things that are Cornish, and going to Norfolk and seeing things that are Norfolk. You know, all those things, that we're losing all of that. We're building the same, you know, not only is it the problem of the land grab, but even if we accept that people have to have houses, they're building the same types of houses down in Southampton as they're building up in Carlisle. And that cannot be right, can it? That ultimately, wherever you go in this wonderful country, that for 2,000 years, since the Romans came, we have had different regional types of places that have been interesting to go to, different ways of life, different accents, all of that. It's all being steamrolled out so that we end up with bland, and I feel that the people are being trained, brainwashed to accept this and not fight against it. And it's a terribly sad thing. Veg Grower says, well said. Fiona Cooper says, all George and Alfie's work at school is set online. So, yeah, there we go. I don't know. I mean, I don't see that's a problem. It can be set online so they can access it. I think, you know, that's quite a useful thing, isn't it? That it depends what the work is. It depends what they're doing. Definitely as a deep fried, I identify as a deep fried Mars bar, says our Ed Loud. Good for you. Kim says, so what we're saying is, what do we say is an example for a real Sussex thing? Well, you're going to, you know, there'll be, Linda Kane will have an answer for that, but most of us would be stumped. We're stubborn and we won't be druv. There we are. Thank you, Linda. We're stubborn and we won't be druv. But you look at a lot of the people in Sussex, they're all fleeing. I remember when I was going out with Harriet, who worked with some young people when she was in an office, and we were talking about houses. And she said to me that the young people want to buy brand new houses. They saw old houses as somehow, and we're talking about old Victorian and before houses, well-built houses that we would think. She said that these young people, they don't like that idea. They want something that's, no one's ever been in. It's like having fresh, new clothes all the time. Second-hand clothes? Oh, my goodness, what? That's had a dead person in it. No, thank you. I don't want a second-hand house. No, goodness gracious, no thanks. Second-hand furniture. My son, Stanley, I mean, bless him, I love him to bits, but when he moved in his house, everything had to be there. It had to have a washing machine, it had to have a fridge, had to have this, it had to have that, had to have carpets. Everybody seems entitled to have everything, and that's a very strange and somewhat dangerous world to think. Andy Frierson says, only got halfway through the show, but you're very spot on with everything you say, Richard. Andy Dalglish says, great stuff, Richard, you should be the leader. I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want that pressure. But you know what I will say? I think that we're in an interesting situation as far as England goes, and I'm differentiating England from Wales and Scotland. But as far as England goes, because I'm English and I'm proud to be English, we saw this huge blue sway. People want to get Brexit done. They may not keep their vote with the Conservatives, as Boris Johnson has acknowledged. They may go and vote Labour or another party another time. But people, generally, I do have hope, because people do believe in democracy, and people, although the elites have tried to stop us from having the democracy which we voted for and should have been done in 2016 immediately without any hassle, and the elites in Parliament who are desperately trying to stop that. We should have had that. It should have happened. The people have said, get Brexit done. Now I think there is a chance that there is a momentum of shift, that we can say, right, let's become independent again. Let's claim our island again. Now, not only can we claim our island and our countries again, we can be proud of our countries. I don't think there's anything wrong with being nationalist. Someone who's proud of your nationalist, that's not to say you have to be racist or any of these other ists and isms or whatever. You can be proud of your nation, proud to be British. The Welsh are proud to be Welsh. The Scottish are proud to be Welsh. The Scottish are proud to be Scottish. Why can't being English is not a dirty thing? But let's not make it bland. Let's keep it as the wonderful place that it once was, and out of the ashes a phoenix will emerge. I'm sure that with the positivity that Boris has brought, and with the possibility that we can now become out of the EU, we can stand proudly on our own, make the deals that we want with the rest of the world, but show again, we may have to work a bit harder, but show again that we have mettle and spirit and a whole load of spunk, if I'm allowed to say that. Before I go, I need to say, I should have mentioned this at the beginning, but Kyle, if you're watching, I'm so sorry, I just had this message I had written down. You probably aren't watching because it's been a slightly taxing show for you. But it's Kyle, I've got this message saying, be a good boy or you won't get any presents at Christmas. That came in earlier today. Kyle, you know who you are. So there we are. I'll just finish off very quickly. Robert Baxter says, kind of wonder if being on the line is good for the environment because it saves you having to travel to see things, therefore using less energy. That's true. Nigel says, Aaron says that everything is the same at school and we actually do try to stop climate change by remembering to recycle and pick up litter. But we should be doing that anyway, shouldn't we? Regardless of climate change, we should be recycling things. I mean, in the old days, you used to take, something broke down. You used to go and get it repaired. You didn't just go and chuck it away and buy something new. Ed Loud says nearly everything decreases in price as it becomes second-hand. Why do I have to pay more for a second-hand house? Yeah, good point. Great show, Richard. Thanks, I'm off. In case you're preaching to the converted, have a good time. Good show, good show. Nighty-night. Glad to spend an hour with you. Thank you very much. Linda Kane says, great show. Lots of similar views reflected in response. Agree with most, but hoping that Brexit does turn out to be the right thing. I think it I just think it will. Just trust me. I think it will. I think it's down to us. You know, it's not down to the Prime Minister or the government. It's down to us now. Once we leave the EU, we did it in 1940. We pitched ourselves against the world. We can do it again. And I think we're a proud nation. I think we're a good nation. I think there's amazing people here on all sides of the spectrum and coin. I think we can definitely be a force to be reckoned with. We had the empire, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. You know, we can stand and proudly go to the world as friends and as intelligent people. So take heart. I think it's a good thing. Anyway, thanks very much. Everyone's saying good night, so that means I better go. Lyle will watch this in the morning. Thanks. Sorry, Andy. I meant to, Kyle rather. I meant to mention that you'd probably fast forward to the end bit where I told him to be a good boy. Got rather wound up with all of that. Anyway, I better go. Things to do, people to see. Phone calls tonight. I got more of this book to read. It's a fascinating insight. Take care and thanks very much. I know I'm, pretty much most of you are sort of in agreement, but it just goes to show if you're in agreement, I'm not just that lone voice calling in the wilderness. Take care and I'll see you on Wednesday. Until then, bye for now. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.